الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين المنتجبين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. For the hastening and the return of our Imam, let's recite the salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I apologize for, yes? This one? Okay. So that I can reach the Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Apologies that I haven't prepared the type of slideshow or PowerPoint that you guys are used to. I'm a little more comfortable with this. I hope we can get this across using this platform. So what I'm doing with the projector is to show you the references, and I think that's important. While it's in Arabic, and I don't know how many of us can read, let alone understand Arabic, I think it's important to see it. Then that can create more incentive in some people to take it upon themselves to learn what this is. But even if nobody really understands it, I think seeing it there is going to be important. I want to show some of these references. So the topic that we have is, how does the 12th Imam guide during the occultation? Right, that's been a question on my mind, a topic that I think is very important. The more you think about the 12th Imam, as we are supposed to, as we are taught to constantly pray for the coming of the Imam, which causes you to think more of him on a more regular basis, then you start thinking of those du'as that we have been given for asking Allah for that very purpose. The more you read that, the more you think about it, the more you start thinking about different aspects, one of them being this question. I don't know if it's occurred to you or not, but if the 12th Imam is the Imam of our time, which means he's the leader leading us during this time, he is not a figure, some shadow figure somewhere on a different planet, in a different realm, irrelevant to us, someone who is living his life in whatever way he wants, and we are in our world dealing with whatever we are, completely disconnected. That's not how it is. The way it is that the 12th Imam is our current Imam. The very purpose of him being born over 1,000 years ago is that we never are left without an Imam. And an Imam is not just a word, it's not just a title, it has a meaning to it. An Imam means a leader. So he's not just, if we want to go by his name, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, salamullahi alayhima. His name is Muhammad and his father's name is Hasan. That's how Arabs go by. He's not just Muhammad ibn al-Hasan who was born. He is the Muhammad ibn al-Hasan who has been the Imam of the Shias for over 1,000 years. Okay. That means that he has been leading for over 1,000 years. All right. Now then the question becomes, well, if he is in ghaibah, if he is in occultation, if we're not able to access him, we cannot see him, we can't decide to go and visit his office in the sense of, someone who he is appointed the way he appointed the first 4 deputies, to go knock on their door and ask them, can you give this letter to the Imam? Even that's not available to us. We cannot do that. We can ask the Imam, we can beg the Imam, we can speak to him, he can hear us, but in terms of him leading us, him being engaged with us, him providing guidance to us, how does that work? Especially during the major occultation. So just knowing that he is the Imam is going to let us know or tell us, remind us, cause us to come to the understanding that he is leading. All right. He must be leading, otherwise he wouldn't be an Imam. He would just be Muhammad ibn al-Hasan. He would be someone who has been born but will become the Imam whenever his rise starts. That's not what we're told. That's never what we've been told by any of our imams. We have been told that he was born, he was 4 or 5 years old, depending on the year of birth. Generally, it's 255 of the Hijri calendar. There's an account that says it was 256, which means he was 4 years of age when he became the imam. 4 or 5, either way. He was not an imam at that point in his life. From birth up to age 4 or 5, he was not an imam. When his father was martyred in Samarra, he became the imam from that point onwards. That means he has led. He didn't only lead during the minor occultation. One of the chapters that I've prepared, and I'm going to be showing a little bit, that's what you see right there, is about the minor occultation. It gives us a little bit of understanding, makes it a little more real for us about how this is, his involvement, his engagement with the community of believers. So that's what the topic is. If we know he does lead, he does provide guidance, a leader guides his following in the direction that he has in mind. Well, if he does that, then how is it? Maybe I can start asking myself, have I had access to that? Have I been led by that? Am I being led by that? How can I follow up with further guidance? Those are the things that can come out of the answer to the question that we are trying to answer here. So, without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the minor occultation, not too in-depth. We don't have too much time. We're already limited to, I think, an hour and a half now. Maybe we can push it to 2 hours because we initially had 2 hours. We started a little late. But it's a lot more than to discuss in 20, 30 minutes. All right. What I have prepared here, this is from the book Al-Kafi. This is a software that I have an annual subscription. I've mentioned in different sessions. I think it's important for people to know it's available, whoever wants to take that. This particular software of the subscription, there's plenty of software on there. There's one on tafsir, there's one on hadith, there's one on fiqh, there's one on dua, there's so many of them, different scholars, history, sometimes themes, sometimes works of particular scholars like Sayyid ibn Tawus, which is one of our great scholars from the 6th or 7th century of the Hijri calendar. This software deals with hadith, and if you can see the tabs up here, I hope you can hear me. These are the names of the books, these are the titles of the books and their table of contents. This book, for those who can read, it says Al-Kafi. That's the title of the book. That book was compiled by Sheikh Al-Kulayni in the minor occultation. All right. This is one of the most authentic books of hadith that we have. One of the most comprehensive, I think I can say the most comprehensive book of hadith of the original collections, because we have more, in a sense, comprehensive versions that came later in the 11th century onward. But in that time frame, this is the most comprehensive. In the 4th and 5th centuries that you saw people compiling these larger collections of hadith as opposed to the smaller ones prior to that. This is the most comprehensive and the most authentic book of hadith that we have available. The first two, if you've heard, and there are some translations of the first 2 volumes, this is an 8-volume work. The common print that's available is 8 volumes. The first 2 volumes is called Usulul Kafi. It's what deals with our beliefs and also with matters of etiquette and so on, morals, etiquettes, spiritual things. All of that is addressed in the first 2 volumes. Then you have 5 extensive volumes of fiqh, how you pray, how you do your hajj, how zakat works, and so on and so forth. Then you have the last volume, which is, he calls it a rawda. It's like a garden, he says. That's just, it's a little more random. It's not as organized as the first 7 volumes are. Anyhow, this is in the first volume, and this is from a unit called Kitab al-Hujjah. It's further up, I can't show you that. And this particular chapter is called Babun fi tasmiyati man ra'ah. The chapter on naming those, those who have seen him. So one of the things that I think is important is, while we all believe, we don't have any doubt that our Imam has been born and so on, but sometimes the question may come our way one way or another, and we find ourselves without any resources to deal with the question. This entire chapter, and this is just one of the books. There's 3 other works. One of them is around this time, two after this time frame, but within the first century after the beginning of the major occultation. Those other three books were entirely compiled on the topic of ghaiba or occultation. One is by Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Nu'mani, one is by Shaykh al-Tusi, the other is by Shaykh al-Saduq. Three books entirely on the concept, on the topic of ghaiba. Because this is earlier than them and more authentic, I chose this particular work. This is one chapter in the series of chapters related to the 12th Imam, his occultation, and so on and so forth. He's dedicated an entire chapter for those who have seen the Imam. That first hadith, let me read it. He says, this is, I think it's good to be familiarized with the books of hadith. These are the people that narrate the hadith. Okay. Muhammad ibn Abdullah Kulayni, the author of the book, narrates from him. And also Muhammad ibn Yahya, this is Al-Attar al-Qummi, this is a very well-known, both are very well-known scholars, teachers of Al-Kulayni. Both of them from Abdullah ibn Jafar al-Himyari, very well-known scholar of the minor occultation, a little earlier. He was a scholar prior to the occultation, but also in the occultation. He says, اجتمعت أنا والشيخ أبو عامر. He says, I and Sheikh Abu Amr. Abu Amr is the first deputy, Uthman ibn Sa'id al-Amri. His kunya, Arabs, you refer to people, fathers mainly, but also mothers, by the name of their first child. So the father of whoever it is. He is known as Abu Amr. اجتمعت أنا والشيخ أبو عامر رحمه الله عند أحمد ibn Ishaq. Says me and Abu Amr were with Ahmad ibn Ishaq. فغمزني أحمد ibn Ishaq. Ahmad ibn Ishaq pressed my hand and said, or pressed me to ask. And أسأله عن الخلف, to ask about the successor. He refers to the 12th Imam as al-Khalaf, the successor. فقلت له, I said to Abu Amr, the deputy of the Imam, إني أريد أن أسألك عن شيء. I'm going to skip part of the narration because it's going to be too lengthy to read. I want to ask you, I want to read this so that you know. These are very well-known scholars. These were scholars of their times. They're very familiar with hadith. They're not an average lay person, okay? A person of that caliber, Ahmad ibn Ishaq in this case, is pressing his peer, or maybe teacher, I don't think he's his teacher, I think maybe his peer, Abdullah ibn Jafar al-Himyari, to ask the deputy of the Imam a question about what? And he says, the question is about seeing the Imam. And he explains before he asks the question, he said, I want to ask you about something that I'm not in doubt in regard to. I don't have any doubts about this. I don't have any doubts about whether or not the 12th Imam is alive. And then he explains all of this that I'm going to skip is about him explaining how he doesn't have any doubt. But he still wants to know, and the person who is pressing him to ask also wants to know this to increase their faith, he says. And I'll read one part of it. It says, I don't have any doubts. The reason why I ask is, one, because I want more faith in this, and that's what Ibrahim does. It says, إِنَّ إِبْرَاهِيمَ سَأَلَ رَبَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ أَنْ يُرِيَهُ كَيْفَ يُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى. Ibrahim was a prophet. He didn't have any doubts, yet he asked Allah to show him how he revives the dead to be able to have more faith. So in the same way, I'm asking, and he prefaces his question with another point too, which is important. I don't know how many of you were in some of the previous workshops we had. I mentioned this in at least one of the previous workshops. Here's one reference for this hadith, for this account. This is Al-Himyari saying, وَقَدْ أَخْبَرَنِي أَبُو عَلِي أَحْمَدُ بْنُ إِسْحَاقَ عَنْ أَبِي الْحَسَنِ. This person, Abu Ali Ahmad ibn Ishaq, one of our scholars, companions of the Ahlul Bayt, he says, he notified me from Abu al-Hasan. Abu al-Hasan is Imam al-Hadi, the 10th Imam. He says, this individual told me that Imam al-Hadi قال سألته وقلت. He said, there's an account from him, from Imam al-Hadi. He says, that man says, I asked the Imam and I said, Man u'amil, who do I interact with? وَعَمَّنْ أَخُذُ وَقَوْلَ مَنْ أَقْبَلُ, who do I take the word from? Who do I accept as a trustworthy person? فَقَالَ لَهُ, he says that the Imam al-Hadi told us, Ahmad ibn Ishaq, Al-Amri thiqa. the 10th Imam, in regard to Al-Amri, the father, said, he is trustworthy. Whatever he tells you of me, he has definitely said from me. وَمَا قَالَ لَكَ عَنِّي فَعَنِّي يَقُولُ. Whatever he narrates from me, he says, I have said, I have definitely said it. فَاسْمَعْ لَهُ وَأَطِعْ. Then listen to him and obey. That's another word there. فَإِنَّهُ الثَّقَةُ الْمَأْمُونُ. Then he says, Abu Ali, the same person, narrated أنه سأل أبا محمد. He narrated that he asked the 11th Imam, Imam al-Askari salamullah alayhi, the same question. عن مثل ذلك فقال له. Imam al-Askari didn't only mention the father, he said al-Amri وابنه, the two of them, the father and son. ثقتان فما أديا إليك عني فعني يؤديان. Whatever they relate to you from me, they have definitely related from me. وما قال لك فعني يقولان. Whatever they say to you, they have said from me. فاسمع لهما وأطعهما. Listen to them, obey them. فإنهما الثقتان المأمونان. They are trustworthy and they are trusted. فهذا قول إمامين. Ahmad ibn Ishaq says, Al-Himyari says, this is the word of two of our Imams that have passed. He says, when I said this, Abu Amr, the deputy of the 12th Imam, fell into prostration. Wabaka, he cried, then he said, okay, you've made your point, now ask your question. So he asks, فَقُلْتُ لَهُ أَنْتَ رَأَيْتَ الْخَلَفَ. After the lengthy conversation, to explain why he's asking and why he's not asking, and also why he's asking him. He has a lot of trust in him because of a trustworthy person narrating to Imam saying, whatever this man says is right. So, okay, have you seen the Imam? فَقُلْتُ لَهُ أَنْتَ رَأَيْتَ الْخَلَفَ مِنْ بَعْدِ أَبِي مُحَمَّدٍ. Did you see the 12th Imam? Al-Khalaf is the successor, referring to the 12th Imam. مِنْ بَعْدِ أَبِي مُحَمَّدٍ. After Abi Muhammad, which is, if you follow, that's Imam al-Askari, because he's the father of Muhammad, that's the name of the 12th Imam. Father of Muhammad, the father of the 12th Imam. Did you see him after the passing or the martyrdom of the 11th Imam? فَقَالْ إِي وَاللَّهِ. He said, yes, by Allah. وَرَقَبَتُهُ مِثْلُ ذَا. He explains, I believe that's an expression saying his neck was such, and he referred to أَوْمَأَ بِيَدِهِ. He showed his hand. So it's either he's showing perhaps maybe how young he was by making reference to how his neck looked, or I think my stronger thought is, and guess is that he's saying the way I see this hand of mine, I saw him. It's very clearly in person, I have seen him. And he continues, I don't want to mention the rest of this account, I don't want to read and take more of this. There are a few more accounts. This is the deputy of the 12th Imam. He has seen the Imam before the occultation begins, before Imam al-Askari is martyred, but also afterwards. There's a number of other accounts that are there. In this part, what I want to say is related to our topic. How does the Imam lead during the occultation? The occultation is two parts, right? The occultation is two parts, the minor occultation and the major occultation. One of the ways the Imam leads during the occultation, when you combine the two, is in this way. He has this man, Abu Amr al-Amri, Uthman ibn Sa'id, and then his son Muhammad ibn Uthman ibn Sa'id, who are established as very trustworthy people by Imam al-Hadi and then Imam al-Askari, and they are representatives of the 12th Imam, and they relay to the people their own personal encounters with the Imam, the messages of the Imam, and so on and so forth. Okay. This can be generalized, besides the points we were trying to make, for you to see accounts, actual accounts, written in actual books of people who have seen the Imam. What's relevant to our theme, to our discussion, is that one of the ways that the Imam has led over the course of this time is through individuals that he appointed during the minor occultation, we call it. Okay. Uthman ibn Sa'id, his son, and then Hussein ibn Ruh and As-Samuri, and the shortest period was with As-Samuri, the last year or two, if I remember correctly. He's the deputy. 4 deputies, one of the ways that the Imam leads is through them. making points to people, providing guidance. People used to write letters to them. There are some accounts of that here, but more of them in Shaykh At-Tusi's book of Ghaiba. He has a number of letters that have been sent to the Imam and then received with the tawqi', with the stamp of the Imam, and also with the handwriting of the Imam. I had addressed that particular topic before. One of the ways that the Imam leads is that way. Okay. Now, that part of it should be pretty well known to you and to all of us. Meaning, the 12th Imam leading through representatives, specific representatives, that were appointed prior to him beginning the occultation, and people were made to trust them through words such as what we read. So besides that part we all should have known to some degree at least. This notion of leading through people through others, is not limited to the minor occultation. The idea of the Imam leading through individuals is not limited to the minor occultation. It's not the case that only during the minor occultation, al-Ghaibatul Sughra, the 12th Imam had individuals that led others. Obviously, that individual is led by the Imam himself. The deputy during the minor occultation is led by the Imam himself. Others are led by that deputy. This concept, this idea, this practice of leadership by the Imam is not limited to the minor occultation. Okay. How do we say that? Where do we get that from? Why do we say that during the major occultation, this is something to look out for, to see, and to know it does exist? But then also what it is and what it is not. Okay. Both of those are important. We don't want to fall in the trap of listening to someone who claims to be representing the 12th Imam, who claims to be receiving guidance from the 12th Imam while they are not. We know the ahadith tell us, there's a number of hadith that say there are 12 false claimants. Okay. 12 false claimants of imamah. So we have false claimants of imamah. We have false claimants of people being deputies of the imam. Both of those are there. We don't want to fall in that trap. We want to understand what this process is, what the 12th imam does. Recite a salawat, please. Allow me to skip on showing you the Arabic. In the same book, in Al-Kafi, there are some chapters. Let me at least show you the title of the chapter. Okay, we have Babun Nadirun, if you see my cursor here on that side of the projector or the projection. So Babun Nadirun fi hal al-Ghaiba. And then the next chapter is Babun fil Ghaiba. 2 chapters just about the occultation. These ahadith go back to the time of Imam al-Sadiq, salamullah alayh, and even prior to him, Imams talking about the occultation. In those, the Imam, one of them is from Imam al-Sadiq, salamullah alayh. The Imam says that the 12th Imam, as we call him, he doesn't say 12th Imam. He says, Sahibu hadha al-am, the one who will lead this, the one who will bring it to victory. These are different titles that refer to the 12th Imam. We refer to him as the 12th Imam. We have that number there. The Imam doesn't use that particular reference. Anyway, he says that he will have 2 different occultations. In one, khassatu shi'atih, will know his whereabouts. In the second, khassatu awliya'ih, the very particular close friends of the Imam are going to know his whereabouts. Okay? So what does this tell us? It's not only in the minor occultation that there are people that are close enough, trustworthy enough with the Imam such that they would know his whereabouts. Let me mention this idea. Knowing his whereabouts, I may know you, I may converse with you, I may talk to you, but you may only see me when I give you a call. That's a certain level of trust, right? I call you when I decide, and you will receive a a call, a phone call. You don't know where I am, you don't know where I live, you don't know any of that. The only thing you know is what I said to you through a phone conversation. Or if it's through letters, I would leave letters somewhere. You wouldn't know where I am. I can't trust you enough to show you and let you know where I live. But I have trust enough with you that you will deliver the message. I will leave the message somewhere that I have made known to you. This is going to be my letter. You go pick it up and you take it. That's a level of trust. A higher level of trust is when you tell the person and they come to see you there, they know exactly where you live. There are accounts in this very chapter that we read and in the other books that talk about people taking care of the Imam, living with the Imam in his house in Samarra for the duration of the time that he lived in Samarra. Because the 12th Imam continued to live in Samarra, in his father's house, in the house that he was raised in, for at least a few years, if not longer. There were some people that knew that. There were some people that came to know that. Those accounts tell us that. But besides some people knowing that, in those very accounts, it becomes clear that there are some that are with the Imam there, assisting him, helping him, taking care of what he needs. So this hadith says that during the minor occultation, that is the case. And that's not even referring to the deputies. That is not even referring to the deputies. It says that during the major occultation, there are going to be people, خاصة أوليائه, very special friends of his, that are going to know his whereabouts. Not that he communicates with, it's not on that level. Not that he leaves letters somewhere. He lets them know his own whereabouts, where he lives, where he stays for the duration of the time that they're in touch with him. Okay, because he probably, I don't know, but he probably doesn't stay in one place. He hasn't lived in the same house for over 1,000 years. So for as long as he is staying in touch with them, they know his whereabouts. The hadith tells us that there are such people. That's one point that we know. It's important to make note of that, because then it will allow us. I'm not going to present you a hadith that says this person or the other person during the major occultation is going to be the one that you go to get guidance from the 12th Imam. That is not the case. We don't have that. I'll show you an account from the 12th Imam. I want to discuss about the last person. That's going to be in Kitab al-Ghaiba. Recite a salawat, please. I think it's the last one. Sorry about this. I don't know why I didn't pull it up before. All right. This is from أبي جعفر محمد بن علي بن الحسين بن بويذ الشيخ الصدوق. حدثني أبو محمد الحسن بن أحمد المكتب. He says, this man, Abu Muhammad al-Hasan ibn Ahmad al-Mukattib, the Shaykh al-Saduq trusts, he says, كنت بمدينة السلام في السنة التي توفي فيها الشيخ أبو الحسن. Madinah al-Salam is part of Baghdad. The office of the 12th Imam moved from Samarra to Baghdad in the earlier years of the occultation. So around maybe 260 is when the occultation begins, 261, 262, or 263 roughly, according to Shaykh Muhammad Hadi Yusuf al-Gharawi. He presents evidence, and it seems legitimate, that the move was made during those first initial years, either during the deputyship of Uthman ibn Sa'id or his son, the earlier days or years of his son. Anyhow, so Madinah al-Salam is part of Baghdad. He says, Abu Muhammad al-Hasan ibn Ahmad al-Mukattib says, I was in Madinah al-Salam في السنة التي توفي فيها الشيخ أبو الحسن Ali ibn Muhammad al-Samuri. He says, I was in that town or that part of Baghdad in the year that Shaykh Abu al-Hasan Ali ibn Muhammad al-Samuri, that's the last deputy, the year that he passed, I was in town. فحضرته, I went and visited him قبل وفاته بأيام. A few days before he passed, I visited him. فأخرج إلى الناس توقيعا. He released to the people a tawqi', which means a letter, a writing from the 12th Imam. نسخته, it said the following. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا علي ibn Muhammad al-Samuri, أعظم الله أجر إخوانك فيك. It addresses that person, the deputy, the last deputy. O Ali ibn Muhammad al-Samuri, may Allah reward your brothers in you. That's one way of telling a person, well, it's not common really to tell a person that they're going to die, but when a person passes, they say that may Allah reward your brothers reward the brothers of that person because of the patience that they're practicing. The way it's worded here, it's to him because he's giving him news that he's going to be passing. The 12th Imam says that you're going to be dying. فَإِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ مَا بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَ سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ. In 6 days you will die. فَاجْمَعْ أَمْرَكَ. Get your affairs together. وَلَا تُوصِ إِلَىٰ أَحَدٍ. Then do not give wasiyya, successorship, to anyone فَيَقُومَ مَقَامَكَ بَعْدَ وَفَاتِكَ, that will take your place after you die. فَقَدْ وَقَعَتِ الْغَيْبَةُ التَّامَّةُ. Because the complete غيبة has begun. فَلَا ظُهُورَ إِلَّا بَعْدَ إِذْنِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى ذِكْرُهُ. Then there is no zuhur. Obviously this zuhur refers to the end of the occultation, right? Zuhur means for when the occultation comes to an end. And the Imam is going to be seen, and the revolution led by him in a way that he is seen is going to begin. فَلَا ظُهُورَ إِلَّا بَعْدَ إِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Zuhur will not happen except after God's permission. وَذَلِكَ بَعْدَ طُولِ الْأَمَدْ وَقَسْوَةِ الْقُلُوبِ وَامْتِلَاءِ الْأَرْضِ جَوْرًا وَسَيَأْتِي شِيعَتِي. So I'm skip that part because it's not relevant to our topic. وَسَيَأْتِي شِيعَتِي. There will come to my Shia مَنْ يَدَّعِ الْمُشَاهَدَةِ. Those who will claim al-mushahada. There's a reason I'm reading this particular account, and I want to spend a little bit of time on it. It's relevant to the way he leads and the point that we made, that leading through individuals, whether they announce that they have seen the Imam or they have not, is not something that is limited to the minor occultation. This is the account that people claim. Based on this, no one can claim to have seen the 12th Imam. And therefore, if anyone claims to have seen the 12th Imam, they are a liar. I want to go over it with you and share with you at least my thoughts on what this says. You can have your understanding of it. From my understanding, this has nothing to do with that idea. And based on it, some of the accounts that I will share with you. Anyhow, let's continue with the account itself. It says, there will come to my Shia those who will claim al-mushahada. Then in brackets it says, ألا فمن ادعى المشاهدة. The brackets here don't mean it's a text it's added from. It means, the footnote explains, there are different scripts or manuscripts that they've put the print together. Some of those manuscripts don't have that piece in there, and some of the manuscripts do. So the different manuscripts are slightly different, but it's obvious for whoever reads that text that's in the brackets should have been there. One of those manuscripts probably skipped it. They didn't write it. They made a mistake on that. But otherwise, it's clear that it must be there. Otherwise, the sentence is incomplete. There will be those that will come to my Shia that will claim al-mushahada. Right now, I'll just translate that as citing. ألا فمن ادعى المشاهدة قبل خروج السفياني والصيحة فهو كذاب مفتر ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Verily, whoever claims al-mushahada, I'll just use again that same translation, citation or citing. Whoever claims citing قبل خروج السفياني, before the rebellion, the rise of as-Sufyani, was-sayha, and the call, the loud call, فَهُوَ كَذَّابٌ مُفْتَرٌ, then they are a liar, and that muftar has the same meaning as the word kadhab. It means they're a liar. So the Imam emphasizes that. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. I translated to you based on the common understanding of that account. Citing is mentioned. When I read this hadith, it's clear to me, because we have been told this is what it means, as soon as I read it to you, you're probably going to understand it in the way you've been told already. When I look at this and I try to relieve my mind of the attachments and all the prejudgments from whatever I've heard, and I just want to judge the text itself, leaving other understandings aside, it is very clear from the text itself, when it mentions قَبْلَ خُرُوجِ السُّفْيَانِ, which is one of the signs of the coming of the 12th Imam, it's referring not to somebody claiming that they have seen the Imam, they've heard the Imam. It's referring to anyone suggesting that the Imam has started his revolt, the Imam has started his rise, the Imam has, his dhuhur has occurred. This is what is being addressed here. The Imam is basically telling us that based on the divine plan and us being foretold when this will happen, the dhuhur will not happen until khuruj al-Sufyani and sayha. Whoever claims that your 12th Imam has started his rise and his dhuhur has occurred, but khuruj al-Sufyani has not occurred yet, then consider them a liar. That's what this is saying. It doesn't mean that if Sayyid Bahrul Ulum, and this is common knowledge, there's a book written or compiled by Al-Muhaddith An-Nuri, as we know him, Sheikh Abbas Qummi's teacher, Muhaddith An-Nuri, who was compiled the other book called Mustadrak al-Wasa'il. In the book, Muhaddith An-Nuri compiles stories of reliable people who have seen the 12th Imam. He, a scholar, studied in Najaf, studied these books, read these ahadith, does not see those scholars, ulama, pious people who claim to have seen the 12th Imam to be liars while he has seen this. It seems his understanding also is not that this is saying whoever claims to have seen the Imam is a liar. That's not what that means. What it is saying is that whoever claims the Imam's dhuhur has occurred, perhaps even referring to those false claimants of imamat that we mentioned, there's going to be 12 of them according to at least a couple of hadith that we have. There will be those who will claim to be imams and therefore the claim to the rise of the Imam. If any claim is made prior to khuruj al-Sufyani, they're liars. If there's any claim made prior to khuruj al-Sufyani, the rise of the Sufyani, and as-sayha. Right now I'm not addressing what as-sayha is and also what khuruj al-Sufyani is. But these are two signs that have been mentioned. The last communication, official communication, through the last deputy of the Imam is not that during the major occultation there will not be any form of contact with a person, or that if there is such contact, that person is not supposed to share it. If they share it, they're a liar. That's not what the account says. Okay. What the account says is that the rise will not happen. Anyone claiming that the dhuhur has occurred, but khuruj al-Sufyani has not occurred, as-sayha has not occurred, they are liars. That's what that hadith is saying. So back to the point, we're saying we have hadith that says during the major occultation, there will be people that are trustworthy enough for the Imam to share his whereabouts with. Those individuals are not just going to be, frolicking with the Imam. Those individuals are not just going to be hanging out and chilling with the Imam. That's not the purpose of the Imam. The Imam is the Imam. And so if he is in touch with these individuals, we don't know the names of course, then there is going to be some level of guidance coming through the Imam to them, and then from them to the masses. This is one of the things we can, by putting these together, once we clear the misconception that says no one can see or share if they have seen the Imam. They cannot share that they have seen the Imam. Once we get rid of that misconception, then there are people, according to a hadith from Imam as-Sadiq's time, that will see the Imam, and we can gather from the different things that are there, including all of the communications of the Imam during the time of the minor occultation, including thinking about what the purpose of the Imam being in occultation and the purpose of him sharing his whereabouts with people. It's just not sharing his location. It's about communicating and in order to guide people. So the first method, let me sum this up. The first method of leadership of the Imam during the occultation, he is not going to lead the masses openly and directly. Okay, directly, openly. He's not going to do that. We know that for a fact regarding the occultation. That's the whole meaning of occultation. The Imam never, even during the time of the minor occultation, went out and started announcing publicly to everyone in a session that I am such and such, and this is what you need to do. That's the difference between zuhur and ghaibah. Zuhur is when the Imam does that. When Imam al-Ridha was the Imam, he did that. When Imam al-Sadiq was the Imam, he did that. When Imam al-Askari was the Imam, he did that. With the 12th Imam, from the day his Imamah begins, he does not do that. Okay. But he does so one way through other individuals. During the minor occultation, we knew specifically whom. During the major occultation, we don't know specifically whom. But if it comes from a trustworthy source that we have already verified, then we can take that account. We can take that account. Recite salawat, please. Thank you. This leads us to the next point that I am going to show you, and something you're probably familiar with, but I'll start with something that you're less familiar with in ways, something a little shorter, something you're a little less familiar with, and it's a little closer to, it's easier to basically transition to the next topic with this account. This account, this is from Misbah al-Mutahajjid wa Silah al-Muta'abbid. You're not familiar with that book, unfortunately. That book is one of the earliest books available to us, of course, of something like Mafatih al-Janan or other books of dua that you're familiar with. This is one of the earlier ones. The compiler is Sheikh At-Tusi. You may have heard that name. He's a very, very well-known scholar in our Shia history. Many of the disciplines owe their current state to Sheikh At-Tusi. This book is entirely on dua and ziyarah and so on and so forth. The writing in red is what I'm reading right now to you. It says, وَمَا رُوِيَ عَنْ أَبِي عَامِرٍ ibn Sa'id al-Amri. You're already familiar with that name from the previous account. That's the deputy of the Imam. This is still during the minor. Sheikh At-Tusi is not during the minor occultation. Sheikh At-Tusi passes away in the year 450 or 460. I think it's 460, but either 450 or 460. So he's definitely, 329 is the beginning of the major occultation. The minor occultation ends in that year. 460 is way over that time, that's clear. But there's been an account, he has seen an account, روِيَ عَنْ أَبِي عَامِرٍ ibn Sa'id. He didn't communicate with the deputy himself. There's a narration from the deputy. Okay? رضي الله عنه, may Allah be pleased with him. قال أخبرنا جماعة عن أبي محمد هارون بن موسى العكبري
أن أبا علي محمد بن همام أخبره بهذا الدعاء وذكر أن الشيخ أبا عمرو قدس الله روحه أملأه عليه. Okay, the way the text is, it's a little, so I'm not going to put you through the trouble of how the text is. There's a little bit of an issue with the text here. But when you read it a few times, it becomes clear what is being said is this. The Shaykh At-Tusi narrates from Abi Muhammad Harun ibn Musa Akbari, some pronunciations go, that's one of his teachers, from Abu Ali Muhammad ibn Hammam, one of the scholars that was also a companion to the first two deputies. And he says that Abu Ali Muhammad ibn Hammam told him about this dua, told Shaykh Tusi's teacher about this dua, and he mentioned that Abu Amr amla'ahu alayh, or amlahu alayh. Abu Amr, the deputy, dictated this. In other words, he sat there or he stood there and he told him to write word for word. It's not like in some cases where the person, in this case, Muhammad ibn Hammam, hears it and then later writes it down. No, the deputy of the 12th Imam told him to write this dua, and he stood there and he dictated word for word and he writes it down. The deputy of the Imam does not make up dua. The deputy of the Imam, according to the account that we just read a few minutes ago, is someone who whatever he relays to people, whatever account he gives people, in fact, whatever guidance as the deputy he gives to people is from the 12th Imam. He didn't make this dua up. This is a dua from the 12th Imam. Now, and he says, this dua needs to be done during the time of the ghaibah of the Imam. And the first part of it you're all familiar with. It starts with Allahumma arifni nafsak فإنك إن لم تعرفني نفسك لم أعرف رسولك. اللهم عرفني رسولك فإنك إن لم تعرفني رسولك لم أعرف حجتك. اللهم عرفني حجتك فإنك إن لم تعرفني حجتك ضللت عن ديني. That part ends right here. What I just read, you're all familiar with, started here, Allahumma, and it ended here. That's what we're familiar with of this dua. The one we're familiar with is from Imam al-Sadiq. It's only that one piece. Imam al-Sadiq in the other chapter of the other book, in Al-Kafi, there's a hadith. Imam al-Sadiq said to make this dua up to this point. The 12th Imam added all of the rest of it. And I'll show you a little bit of how long this dua is. That's the second page, third page, fourth page, almost 5 pages. Okay. I'll share that a little. And I'll try to tell you why I'm bringing this up in the context of our discussion. Imam al-Sadiq is preparing people from his time for an occultation, so nobody's caught off guard. Everybody, when they see it happening, like, oh, what's happened? We weren't told. No, you were told of this. Okay. And for that brief dua, at the beginning of the dua, the 12th Imam, during his time, during the minor occultation, gives us all of this. Okay. All of this. This addition. Let me, before I answer your question and tell you where you can find it so you can start reading it, we can all start reading it. There's very valuable material in there related to our topic. We're bringing something up here related to our topic. I'll tell you where you can find it. But right now, during the minor occultation, through an individual that we specifically know was in touch with the Imam and represented the Imam, that's the method of guidance in terms of, or the medium of guidance in terms of who brings it to us. But in terms of the content of guidance, or maybe the literary medium of guidance, it's in the form of dua. Okay. Some of you are familiar that the dua of Sahifa al-Sajjadiyya, Imam Zayn al-Abidin, it's not just what you and I understand of dua, which is we find this book and we think it's like a book of spells. You have issues with your rizq, you look up the right dua, the right formula, you say those words, and then suddenly you're going to have your sustenance going to make 6-digit figures all of a sudden. You start reading that dua. Well, don't try it because you're not going to get 6 digits. You may lose a couple digits if you read that dua. Try that particular dua, not try the effects of it. Go read the meanings of it. Don't just read the Arabic. Go read the meaning and see for yourself if you want 6 digits anymore or not. Okay. If you read it, I think you will stop wanting 6 digits. The teaching that is there, it's teachings. It's not just ask God for this, ask God for that. This is a dua in occultation. Even that very brief first part that Imam As-Sadiq taught, okay? That very brief part, it's not just a dua or just sit down and ask Allah. If you sit down and ask Allah, meaning you repeat those words without wanting what is being said, you're not going to get it. If you want it, for example, it says, Allahumma arifni hujjatak. It starts with that. فَإِنَّكَ إِن لَمْ تُعَرِّفْنِي حُجَّتَكَ لَمْ أَعْرِفْ نَبِيَّكَ or Rasulak. This one says Rasulak. There's one of them that says, the one from Imam says Nabiyak, if I remember correctly. Doesn't make much of a difference. It starts with that. If I don't know your hujjah, I'm not going to go know your Rasul. If you want to know the hujjah, you're not just going to sit there and ask Allah for that. You're going to follow up with that. You're going to go and search for that hujjah. You're going to go try to figure out how you can get access to that hujjah. There's a lot of steps that come with wanting to know the hujjah. Okay. It's not something to read. It's something that teaches you what to want. And while you ask God because you want it, and whatever you want, you must ask God because that's the only source that you can get what you want from. While you ask God because you want it, you will also follow the steps that God tells you to get it. In terms of sustenance, there's certain steps you need to take. In terms of gaining knowledge, there's certain steps that you need to take. Finding the hujjah, there's certain steps you need to take. If you want it, you will go and figure it out. It's a teaching. You need to want to know who your hujjah is. That brief part that Imam As-Sadiq is teaching from his time, mid-2nd century, almost 2 centuries before the end of at least the minor occultation. The Imam is teaching the Shia, you need to know this is happening and you need to have a strong want to go figure out. Based on that, it is, for example, that during the minor occultation, the beginning of occultation, where the Shia are not familiar with this, the legitimate version of ghaiba or occultation, the Shia have heard of the Waqifi movement, a false claim of occultation. They've heard the Ismaili version of occultation, a false claim to occultation. But this notion that an actual occultation is happening is not something they're familiar with. You have people coming to Baghdad, which becomes the office of the 12th Imam, from various regions. There's an account of a man from Egypt. You had Shias from Egypt that came to Medina to figure out who his Imam is. That's based on this teaching. Because the want is created in people, in the Shia, to know who their Imam is. When they hear the 11th Imam has passed, he's been martyred, they don't know who the next Imam is because they have that strong desire to know who he is. Based on the likes of that dua, they go and try to figure out who it is. The dua has a teaching to it. It's not just read this dua. The rest of this dua is the content provided by your leader for the duration of the occultation. These are the things you need to create in yourselves, the wants you need to have, the understandings you need to have. Okay. The 12th Imam is given this when? During the time of the minor occultation. Through individuals, or an individual that we know who exactly he is, and that he was definitely a deputy of the 12th Imam. Okay? So, let me make this a little more clear. Moving away from the person as the medium, it's not the Imam himself, it's going to be through another individual. During the minor occultation, those whom we know, there's 4 names that we know. During the major occultation, we are not given names by the 12th Imam, okay, or by any of the other Imams. There's other ways of determining whether they are truthful or not. But there are people that are such. And if there are, then we need to get our hands on whatever the Imam has given them in terms of content. Besides that medium, it's the content. The content he's provided, some of it has been provided to all of the Shia from the early days. One of them is this dua. Back to the question that was asked regarding that, where can we find this? Now, I don't know which book of dua you guys use. There's various ones, and different cultural backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds are more familiar with different ones of these books. The one that in many of the Farsi-speaking and also Arab-speaking countries that I'm aware of are familiar with is Mafatihul Janan. Mafatihul Janan, if you check the ziyarah section, the dua section, any of those, you're not going to find this. Sheikh Abbas Qummi, after completing the book, those chapters that he had together, then he realized that he is missing certain things there. He added them, okay, amendments, additions. They're called mulhaqat, okay, at the end. If you've seen Hadith al-Kasa at the end of Mafatihul Janan, Hadith al-Kasa is actually not put there by Sheikh Abbas Qummi. Those are put afterwards in the prints that are available. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying that's not, so it's before the Hadith al-Kasa that you find. Toward the end there, you'll find one of the mulhaqat has this dua in it. And if you search those names, you'll probably find it even online. The next content that we've been given in terms of guidance, leadership from the 12th Imam is another dua that we're all familiar with, but I don't believe we're familiar with it in this way or from this perspective. We don't view it from this perspective. Yes. Sure. Okay. So I'm being told we're going to have a 5-minute break.
Yeah. Okay. We start a little late. We can take a little break.
Okay. So 5 minutes break. I'm told, I guess, 9. Recite salawat, please. Oh my God, it was worse than a red eye because it's supposed to be flying at 10:30 p.m. last night from California. Is that your daughter? MashaAllah. I only see your boys, so is that your only daughter? Or?
No, I will have an older daughter.
Okay, MashaAllah. She's okay. Yeah, so I was supposed to fly at 10:30, and then they delayed it to 12 and then 12:30.
What did you
So
get?
there's a little bit of choppy. I got in at 12. I landed around 12 p.m. today. Yeah. I got enough sleep where I didn't. Yes, black. Yes. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. How are you doing? Well, everything is doing well? Nobody was ready for it, so they didn't have any hotels.
The worst was there was fog. So we flew from Istanbul to Moscow.
Okay.
So we flight and our start time. They're like, you know what? There's no room in the like. Why don't you check in your check-in? I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that because every time I do that, something happens. So. So I checked in envelope. They took it. I never got it. I never got it.
Really? You didn't get it?
I never got it in my
to answer, but incriminate yourself. So they may ask you, for example, if they ask you something that you are testifying in court, that can be a crime for you. You don't have to answer those questions. Say, yeah, you can say, I can't answer that question. And you can cite that. You can say it's incrimination. What happened to this? Uh-huh.
So one guy got criminal offense because what he did is he gave the IP, right, into his property to their competition. So he ended up in jail
Really?
for like 2 years, yeah. It was dangerous, man. I left it there, I never see this coming out of my life.
Alhamdulillah. Allah. What is going on with this? It is. But not as expensive as New York, is it? Really? There's a lot of taxes? Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that because I don't own a property, obviously, so I didn't.
But we had to do insurance. I got a problem for 450 and I was about to come in the value was
Oh, really? It's dropped. Oh, that hasn't been happening lately.
hasn't been happening since 2013. But I'm talking about in 2011.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Actually, I'm going to have to pull this up again. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. Where we left off was that we have communications from the Imam as the Imam. He leads. How does he lead during the occultation? We talked about him not leading in person where he is seen or heard. It's through individuals during the minor occultation and the major occultation. In two different ways, but generally it's the same in that there are people that are in touch with the Imam. They take things from the Imam and relay them to us, and we take them. That's the guidance that comes our way. Then also, how does he guide? How has he guided through those individuals one way or another? He has given us some instructions. We got to the content. And we said those are many times at least in the form of dua. One dua was the one that we showed from Misbah al-Mutahajjid, and Shaykh At-Tusi in the book narrated that account from the deputy himself, the first or second deputy. I'm leaning towards the second. But anyhow, from one of the first two deputies, he narrated that dua. It was from the 12th Imam. It contains information. He's leading us by giving us that dua. He's not just saying, oh, there's this dua, by the way, if you want to read. No, that's part of him leading us. And the next one that I want to talk about is another dua, but this one seems to be, at least it's not documented to be from one of the deputies. What do I mean by it's at least not such?
I am not entirely sure if this was given to us during the minor occultation or the major occultation. Okay, I have not been able to determine that timeline yet. I may be able to, but I have yet not been able to determine that. But it does not cite one of the deputies, that's clear. And that is Dua al-Nudbah. Dua al-Nudbah that you're probably familiar with, that we know it as a dua on Fridays. Some centers at around noontime before their Jummah prayers, they do it. Some places they do it early Friday. On Eids, before the Eid prayer, you hear it being done. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's wrong to limit our interaction with that dua to those sessions where it's read in that language that, at least from what I know, none of us here understand that language. This dua that is given to us is part of the Imam's leadership. He is leading us. How does he lead us? A second example, besides people that he speaks to and he gives us guidance through, he has spoken to some people and given us instructions, guidance that applies to all of us from those early days of the occultation all the way up to today. This is Dua al-Nudbah. I'm going to narrate it from this book. It's called Al-Mazar al-Kabir. And if you can read that, it says Libn al-Mashhadi up here. And also up here. That's the title of the book. That's the author. It's around the 6th century of the Hijri calendar. I'm not familiar if you are, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sayyid ibn Tawus or not. Sayyid ibn Tawus comes after Ibn al-Mashhadi. Okay. Around, I believe, early 7th century, maybe late 6th century of the Hijri calendar. But this is earlier. This is the first book that I have found this dua in, the earliest book that I have found this dua in, and I'll explain what that is when I talk about who we get it from. These are important. I think it adds to our understanding of what this is and where it came from when we say it's from the 12th Imam. Qala, he says right at the beginning, number 2, there's a number 2 there, and then it says Ad-Du'a lin-Nudbah, and then it says Qala Muhammad ibn Abi Qurrah. Muhammad ibn Abi Qurrah is the first person that we come across here, and he says نقلت من كتاب أبي جعفر محمد ibn الحسين ibn سفيان البزوفري رضي الله عنه هذا الدعاء. So the author or the compiler of the book called Al-Mazar al-Kabir in the mid 6th century or 5th century, I believe 6th century, 500 something, that'll make it 6th century. Al-Mazar al-Kabir, that he narrates from Muhammad ibn Abi Qurrah, who then narrates from Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn al-Husayn ibn Sufyan al-Bazawfari. Who are these two individuals? Okay. Who are these two individuals? I was not familiar with those two names. I had to look them up, and it took a while to figure out who these individuals are. So I'm not going to bore you with the details of the names. That's besides the point. I'm going to give you a timeline. The first person, Muhammad ibn Abi Qurrah, is, remember in Misbah al-Mutahajjid, we talked about Shaykh al-Tusi. He passes away in 460. Shaykh Tusi's teacher's teacher is Muhammad ibn Abi Qurrah. Okay? So you go back 2 generations of scholars. Shaykh al-Tusi is like the 2nd or 3rd generation of scholars in the major occultation. His teacher's teachers goes back a couple generations. I'm not entirely sure if he goes into the minor occultation. I was not able to do enough research to determine that for sure. But then he narrates from his teacher, Muhammad ibn al-Husayn ibn al-Sufyani. The problem is, Muhammad ibn Husayn, Hussein, in other words, Muhammad's father, is also a well-established scholar, and his timeline seems to be around Shaykh al-Kulayni's timeline in the minor occultation. And so Muhammad, his son, not sure if he was also in the minor occultation, or by the time he's a scholar, he's also in the major occultation. So that leaves, this is why I said I'm not sure if this is during the major occultation or the minor occultation. But as you can see, it says, I will read the following. I'll continue reading it and you'll see this. He says, I narrate the author of the book from that person, from the second person, this dua, وَذَكَرَ فِيهِ أَنَّهُ الدُّعَاء لِصَاحِبِ الزَّمَانِ. He said in it that this dua is for صاحب الزمان. And يُسْتَحَبُّ أَن يُدْعَى بِهِ فِي الْأَعْيَادِ الْأَرْبَعَةِ. And it's recommended to read this and to perform this dua in the various Eids. Okay, the 4 Eids it mentions. And then it starts, it's the dua that we are familiar with. I did a little more research and so the book that he didn't create this. This is in the 6th century. The book was compiled in the 4th century. There's a gap there. The book was available, so he looked at it and he took the dua from that book. We don't have that book, but the book is available for another couple centuries. I have not seen anyone narrate from that book today. I'd never seen it, never heard of that book. So I don't think we have it available right now, but Shahid al-Awwal or Shahid al-Thani in the 8th or 9th century have narrated from that book as well. So what do I want to get to? I want to get to this. It's either the end of the minor occultation, toward the end of the minor occultation, or the beginning of the major occultation. This individual, Muhammad ibn al-Husayn ibn Sufyan, who has initially written this and put this in the book, he doesn't say where he got the dua from. He just simply says this is for the 12th Imam. He doesn't state where he got it from. He doesn't say I got it from the deputy. This is a dua for the 12th Imam. And that's one of the ways this communication happens. The person doesn't necessarily say that I have seen or heard the Imam say this. Okay. It's a trustworthy scholar saying this is a dua. Then when you read it, many ulama have said, I believe it's, I'm not sure if it's in this footnote here or in the footnote at the end of the dua. I think it's at the end of the dua. And the scholar who's done the research that you see in the footnotes, he says it's clear that it's from the 12th Imam. All right. Scholars have looked at this. It's clear it's from the 12th Imam, one way or another. So this is another dua that we have received from the 12th Imam. This is not something that some alim came up with. This is something that we have received from the 12th Imam. Look at it from that perspective. Your Imam who is leading you is giving you this dua. Read it and look at the meanings a little bit and see if you can get a little more out of the dua compared to just a dua for the coming of the 12th Imam, or the way it is common in the Iranian culture, maybe in other cultures as well, to read it with tears, cry, the memories of the Ahlul Bayt, what they did to the Ahlul Bayt. There's lines of it. Ayn al-Hasan, Ayn al-Husayn, cry for 20 minutes and narrate stories about that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying, is that the objective? Or is that simply the objective? Is that what is coming out of this? When you get to Ayna in the dua, you come to a point where it keeps repeating. Ayna baghiya, after Ayna al-Hasan, Ayna al-Hasan, Ayna al-Husayn, Ayna abna al-Husayn. It keeps going until it gets to Ayna baqiyatullah. From that point onwards, it's clear the references are to baqiyatullah, to the 12th Imam. Are those just simply titles that are being mentioned, or is there more to it than that? If you start to realize that the Imam is your Imam, if he communicates, then it's as the leader, he is providing that communication. He is giving you something. Take what is given to you in that light and look at it in that way. Try to understand it in that way. I think it will broaden your perspective. It will add to what you will understand from the dua compared to if you don't see it in that way. Was that a hand up? That's one of the things that some have said, yes. The accuracy of the material in it, when someone compares it to all the other narrations that we have from the Ahlul Bayt salamullah alayhim ajma'in, to be able to word a dua with this length without any errors and with the depth that it has, it's hard to imagine anyone but a ma'soom could do this. That's one of the ways that some people have determined that, yes. Okay. Recite a salawat, please. The last thing I want to say about this, how does the Imam lead during the occultation? I've talked about two things. One is the person that we receive it through. Two, the actual content, and through that, I also went over one of the preferable structures that it's given through, okay, which is dua. The Imam has preferred this structure. This isn't the only way that the Imam has provided instruction, but it is one of the ways that we have received a lot of instructions and a lot of guidance from the Imam. Okay, it's a preferred method. And I want to use that to get to a third thing regarding how the Imam guides. Okay, and that is, during the major occultation, how does one, because there's no given names, it's not in any book that says who can receive that and who cannot. All right. The people who reach a level where the Imam trusts them to that degree, how can one become that and therefore directly receive that from the Imam? It's so far, I think we've established that is possible. And it doesn't say who can and who cannot do that, which means it's open to anyone. I don't know about you, but I think it'll be nice to get something directly. How does this happen? How does this work? And from the two examples I mentioned in terms of what the Imam has provided to us, I think when I read those du'as, and I've read both of them, and I try to pay attention to them in that way that I mentioned to you, both of them, there are a number of elements. One of them is information about who we need to become, okay, what the direction is, what we need to work toward as the Imam is active. All of those can be obtained from the dua that is given to us. But there's something about putting that in the form of dua that has a dua that has an emotional touch to it as well, that has a spiritual touch to it as well. And it's not just simply said, okay, we're going to be going against the dhalamah. Okay. Instead of saying, people, you need to prepare to go against oppressors, you need to get the strength and stand against oppressors. Instead of that, you read what the Imam teaches us, reminds us very quickly, a brief history of God sending the Prophet and Amir al-Mu'mineen, and then what happened to Amir al-Mu'mineen and the atrocities against them right after the Prophet. And وَعَلَى الْعَطَائِبِ عَلَى أَهْلِ بَيْتِ مُحَمَّدٍ وَعَلِي فَلْيَبْكِ الْبَاكُونَ. And what happened to the family of the Prophet and Amir al-Mu'mineen, the criers should cry. وَيَضِجَّ الضَّاجُّونَ. And you get into an emotional state, and then you start getting into أَيْنَ الْحَسَنُ أَيْنَ الْحُسَيْنِ, and then you get to أَيْنَ بَقِيَّةُ اللَّهِ, and then you start reading in that line, أَيْنَ قَاطِعُ دَابِرِ الظَّلَمَةِ. Where is the one who is going to cut off the supply line of the oppressors? There's two ways you can present that. One is just say, guys, you need to fight oppressors. Another is put it in the form of a dua. Look at history, not as a historic background, in the form of dua. Get your emotions involved. See what happened to your previous imams. Cry for them. Now say, where's the one who's going to cut all of this out? One of the differences, for example, is the motivation this creates in you is much different. The
motivation that it creates in a person is very different than just reading, okay, this is what happened, this is what you need to do. Zero emotions. I was giving speeches in a community, and obviously I think all of you know by now that I tend to include aspects of the religion that others tend to exclude, namely the political stuff. Okay. Some people don't like that. All right. Especially if it's presented in a way that motivates people. Now, I was there passionately describing what we need to do, and some people had to shoot that down to try to get me to stop speaking in that matter on those topics. They're like, oh, this is emotional. Like, who said emotions are bad? Okay. Emotions are used all the time. You're here for Muharram. It was actually Muharram lectures. The whole involvement of people with Muharram is emotional. Your emotions are very heavily tied in to everything you do in Muharram. Okay. And Imam al-Hussein got them tied in. Imam Zayn al-Abidin got them tied in. Okay. All of us have emotions about where we use them. Do we use that passion, that strength, that motivation elsewhere, or do we use it where they're giving it to us? When the Imam gives it to us in that form, one of the things that it does is that, but that's not right now. The last point I'm trying to make is not that part of it, the motivation. Another thing it does is the spiritual aspect of it. Okay, the movement of the 12th Imam, sure, it's all the ahadith you've read, it talks about the Imam يَمْلَأُ الْأَرْضَ قِسْطًا وَعَدْلًا بَعْدَمَا مُلِئَتْ ظُلْمًا وَجَوْرًا. He's going to establish justice after it being filled with injustice. Everybody knows that. Dua Nudba has got plenty of it, and there's so many references. All right, we know that. Does that make us social activists the way other social activists are? Do we become political activists the way others are? Do we start getting politically involved and then worry about how many people show up to the protests, like the Quds protests? And if anybody comes and says, look, we'll join the protests, but we'll carry our rainbow flag as well. Okay. Are you going to give in to that? Or are you just a political activist? You have your objectives, they have their objectives, we meet somewhere, and so we can come to common grounds. Or no, this is something that's different. This is a spiritual political movement. It's not a political movement. It's not removing dhulm in the way that others who don't know that inna shirka la dhulmun azim understand dhulm. Some people just understand dhulm to be killing, and then they hide all the killing and then all the nice stuff the way they sound. They talk about liberties, they talk about civil rights, they talk about human rights, they talk about human rights including gay rights, and so on and so forth. All that sounds like justice. Okay. But when the foundation of it is dhulm, a believer understands inna shirka la dhulmun azim. What they are saying is itself dhulm. Advocating for gay rights is dhulm. Okay. But if you don't have that spiritual guidance, if you don't have that spiritual development, if you're not getting close to that source, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then if you develop any of those goals that you see, it's not going to be the same. There's a spiritual development process that's part of this. The du'as add that touch. The du'as increase that in us through increasing the want for that. For example, in Dua al-Nudbah, one of the things that you read after Aina, and then you keep saying, where is the Imam? Then you get to Yabna Sadat al-Muqarrabin. As teachers have taught us, the wording changes from the absent to the present. Instead of referring to someone who is absent, where is he who is such? Where is he who is such? Now you start addressing the Imam in person. Yabna Sadat al-Muqarrabin. O son of the Sadah.
oh this, oh that. So you're supposed to get into and transition into that mood. You're addressing your Imam directly. After a little bit of that, getting you ready, then you start to say, بِأَبِي أَنْتَ وَأُمِّي. My father and mother be sacrificed for you. هَلْ إِلَيْكَ يَا ابْنَ أَحْمَدْ سَبِيلٌ فَتُلْقَى. Is there a path that I can take that you could be met? You start desiring a want to see the Imam. A desire. We have believers that are familiar with these du'as. You see this fervor in wanting to see the Imam. This city, some of you probably saw him. Ajay Teherani used to be here in the 90s, in Imam Ali Center though. And I remember his dua nutbah was serious. They had a Friday morning dua nutbah. People used to make it a point to go there before work, early morning. Okay. He was one of those figures that this fervor had been created in, and he would pass this on to others. People who are familiar with these du'as, who are in touch with these, who make these du'as part of their life in the form of that du'a. They understand what is being said. You see that, the want, the desire, and then you see du'a nutbah being read. أَيْنَ سَادَةَ الْمُقَرَّبِينَ. Just get it over 20 minutes. It's done. That's not the objective. I don't want to say don't even read that much. Okay. It's okay, read that much. Don't skip on even that. Don't eliminate it completely. Add to it. Don't take it out. Add to it. The person who has developed that, the Imam has taught us this. This is his leadership. I'm just relating those words the same way that, unfortunately, during the ghaibah, we don't see him. We don't have that access. Others who saw and heard have relayed to us his teachings. But we should take them as the Imam who's living. There's a difference between taking this guidance from hadith from Imam al-Sadiq salamullah alayh and taking it from the Imam of our time. There's a difference between those. Try to see those differences. We've got to develop these wants, these desires that have been given to us in the form of these du'as. They are from the Imam. It's part of how he leads those who connect to him through this method, and they connect to Allah or with Allah through this method. They are able to gradually, some of them who are more serious, are able to come to a point where maybe they can also receive something directly, and we hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us one of them. We ask Allah to please the heart of the Imam of our time from us. We ask Him to hasten His return. We ask Him to help us be His true and close companions. We ask Allah to help all those who are helping His cause, especially our ulama, our maraja, above all, our leader. We ask Allah to forgive us all of our sins, forgive our parents, grandparents, all relatives, believers, those who are alive and those who've passed. And we ask Allah to grant all believers their hajat, needs, and requests, and relieve all the people of the world of the oppressions they're facing. بالنبي وآله رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة مع الصلوات.
Thank you, Allah. We open for question and answers if you have question and answers.
Yes.
So my question is regarding our connection to the Imam of our time.
Yes.
So usually, like I'm sure you also realize is that, especially from the pulpit, we're always, listening to, the merits of Imam Ali alayhi salam, the Messiah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam.
Correct.
Even though we see the history repeat that Imam Ali was martyred, Imam Hassan was martyred, Imam Hussein was martyred, till that time that we are currently in the presence of the Imam of our time. So why is it that we only emphasize, not saying that, there's Imam Ali is not a great Imam or he doesn't have that great status, but why is it that being currently, we neglect our connection to the Imam, or why nobody mentions that to emphasize the connection to the Imam of our time?
So I guess what I take your comment as is, or your question, because you worded it in the form of a question, but
I think it's a criticism of the way that we have generally conducted ourselves as a community of believers, pretty much worldwide. Some more, some less, but generally speaking, those are the types of things that we hear, and less of the 12th Imam. I've even heard of cases where they asked in their view at least, a scholar to speak on the topic of the occultation, and that scholar said, or declined, and he said he's not willing to talk on the topic. And then the excuse was, I guess this is in some people's minds, that people are not ready. Now, I don't know what that means. Maybe they're not ready because you didn't talk about it. So I hope that changes. I pray that changes. I think there's a lot of work to be done in this area. I personally find myself learning more and more and finding a lot of things that are not tapped into. Even as I said, like Dua Nutbah, I've been familiar with Dua Nutbah since before I went to Qum. When Mullah Tehrani was here in New York, he came down to Maryland where I was, and we heard him do the dua there and other duas as well. So I've known that dua from a while back. But this perspective on the dua was not something that I was taught. Okay, I looked into it and studied it, paid attention to the meanings, and the more I look at it, the more clear it gets, or the more clarity I get on that. But again, I present it, you see for yourself, but I think there's a lot of work to do. We have received a lot of guidance. We have not taken all of that guidance the way we should have. And the only way we can do that as individuals, I would recommend the pulpits can do whatever they want. Okay, that does not justify an individual who understands a lack. Somebody doesn't notice it, doesn't realize it, they just think, okay, this is what Islam is. Okay, but as soon as you start realizing that, wait a second, there's something missing here. I notice there's something missing. Well, if they're not going to address it, then you need to address it. We all, كلكم راع, we have this hadith, كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول. All of you are like shepherds, and all of you are responsible. That's the way it works in Islam. Okay, it's not like a certain class of people that are supposed to wear the turban, and then they are responsible, and nobody else is responsible. Everybody's responsible. Sure, the ones who know are more responsible, that's clear, than those who don't know. But anyone who recognizes there's something missing in their knowledge of the religion, then it becomes their responsibility to try to follow up and try to get information. But I completely agree with the criticism. I think it is there, and I hope that things change.
One more question following up that how do we increase our individual connection to the Imam in the sense that one way is that you mentioned that reading Quran and other du'as,
Yes.
trying to understand it. But in terms of, let's say there's some non-religious that you're not interested in reading du'as. Of course, we explain it to a person who's not interested in this type of thing.
Yeah.
How would we try to help him or help oneself to connect to that?
I don't know if I do have a way to create interest in someone who is not interested in spirituality, in dua, in supplication, to want to have more of a contact with the Imam. I don't know, while you keep them in that state, how I can spark that interest. Okay, I think what needs to happen is for the interest to be sparked to want those things. Okay, and one of the ways I have seen for myself, personal experience, and I've seen helping others has been very effective, is taking people, with them choosing, not forcing them, but telling them, just try different things, taking them to areas, places, locations where those feelings are strong. There's an environment created with that. For example, the haram of the Ahlul Bayt, ziyarah of the Ahlul Bayt. Okay. I had been with a group that was taking youth from the West from 2004 up to
2013, I think I was involved with the group. They used to go from the UK, and they had people come joining from the US and Canada as well. And it's a month long. It was a month long. We didn't have too many classes per day. It was just an experience. Going to the haram, going even for fun activities, just being in the dorms for a whole month. And I saw people change drastically. People who were even in their mid-teens, 13, 14, mid-teens is a little earlier, 14, 15, okay, onwards, that came with zero interest in any of that. When we first started the class, I had to teach a theology class. And if you haven't noticed it, I'm very boring at teaching. So I'm teaching there, and except for 2-3 people that are really interested, everybody else is sleeping, including this brother. And by the end of the trip, the brother did not want to leave. Okay, he was in tears. He was crying, and the ziyarats and everything that had taken effect. I've seen that, and for me personally, my own personal experiences, what has sparked more interest are environments like that, going to the Ahlul Bayt and that, along with others. I may not have interest, but you go with a few others, some of them are a little more interested in it. It creates an environment and gives an experience. A person starts to realize, there's more to life than what I'm familiar with. Okay. Other areas, visiting the shuhada, they can also be like a shafi' between us and the Ahlul Bayt, because sometimes we're way down there, and we need somebody to connect us to the Ahlul Bayt so that they can connect us to Allah. We need that. The shuhada have played that role for me personally. I know that many times. So I would say these were some examples, but the general theme is to try to spark that interest by giving an experience, helping them choose to go somewhere where there's an experience they can maybe get a feel for it. Should we wait for the Imam to take the world out of dhulm? Let me explain a little something about what this concept of intidhar in the context of your question is. Okay. This, I guess, the aspect of it that has to do with not doing certain things. Waiting in the sense of not doing certain things. Because as you probably have heard, intidhar includes certain things that you have to do. Okay. But then there's an aspect of not doing certain things. You understand that from the ahadith related to the topic. Okay. For example, at the time of Imam as-Sadiq, some of the ahadith I was reading today again, it refreshed my mind, from Al-Kafi. People who were obviously feeling the atrocities, the aggression, and the oppression of the system, the Umayyad system, especially they see it against their Imam, and they see it against whomever accepts that Imam. They get fed up with it. And when they started seeing signs of a public uprising against the Umayyads, which did end up bringing down the Umayyad dynasty, but then established the Abbasid dynasty, which can argue to be worse than the Umayyad dynasty in ways. When the followers of the Ahlul Bayt saw that development, they felt this is our time. And we need to get involved with this. And we need to jump on this. We need to be at the forefronts of this. We need to be leading this. And so on and so forth. At that point, we have a number of hadith from the Imams telling their followers, this is not it. Stick to your house. Don't leave your house. The don't be involved is related to that context, and is referring to a public uprising that is happening, that the followers of the Ahlul Bayt would like to have joined because they felt what they felt in terms of the oppressions against themselves and their Imam, but also seeing an opportunity to get what they thought were their ideals. And the Imam tells them, that's not it, and this is not the time, and I'm not the one. You need to stick to your house. What do we take from that? Some people have taken from it, all right, until the zuhur of the Imam himself, where he can be seen, we should not be involved at putting a stop to any level of oppression. Okay. That is absurd. But it is an understanding that some people have. Why is it absurd? It's because none of the elements within the context have been taken into consideration. A, in understanding that hadith. B, you are interpreting all of Islam, I wanted to say in light of, but it's really not in light of. It's in the darkness of your understanding of that one account. What happened to all the verses about jihad fi sabilillah? You're putting all of that aside because your understanding of this hadith is until the coming of the 12th Imam, you're not supposed to do anything. If you did pay attention to the context, you would realize that's not what is being said. What's being said is not that the Imam says, I'm not fighting oppression right now. That's not what he said. He didn't say, don't fight oppression. He said, don't join this movement. It's not our movement. Don't pick up arms and start fighting them along with these people who are driven by this hype, unguided, doesn't have a head, a proper head. People are just emotional, just almost like mobs going around. This is not your thing. I remember when, I don't know if you remember when the Occupy Wall Street was happening. We had some of those who were, religious, Shia, revolutionary, and they felt like, oh, we need to join that. The same thing that Imam Sadiq's statement was true about this one. Okay. This is not your thing. Sure, it shows that people are upset. Yeah, when we look at that history, you realize that the masses did not agree with what the Umayyads did or what the Abbasids did. People were really unhappy with it, but they weren't ready to be able to move in the direction that the Ahlul Bayt, the proper leadership, was giving them. That's what was happening here. You can't join that and go get incarcerated because you did something along with a bunch of angry people who are against the system. Yeah, the system is to be against. The system is wrong. But that's not your movement. That's not your direction. Stay home. Don't join that. Okay. Not because it's bad or the system is better than that. No, it's just not our thing. If you get caught up with it, you will end up doing wrong things, thinking that you're doing the right thing. So the idea that is presented there is there's a certain process that the Ahlul Bayt have in working against oppression. They were involved in it throughout their time before the occultation. The 12th Imam has been involved in that over the course of these over 1,000 years. It's different than the process that some of us have in mind, that we think, okay, there's oppression, we need to get rid of it now. Let's get out our, guns, do something. No, that's not how it works. It's a different process. Learn what that process is. Fight against oppression the way the Ahlul Bayt have taught us to fight against it. Doesn't mean don't fight. It means fight in the right way. And when the right time comes, like during the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, that you rise with the sword, then you rise with the sword. When you rise without the sword, like Imam al-Mujtaba, you rise without the sword. Okay, or Imam Zayn al-Abidin. So those methods need to be learned. It doesn't say to wait for the 12th Imam before you start engaging against oppression. Right now, in the United States of America, our jihad and our responsibility in following the Ahlul Bayt, in fighting against oppression, here is to speak out against it bravely. Let them do whatever they want. Okay. if you want to be on that path, don't think you're courageous if you say some ridiculous thing on one of these protests and one of these movements, again, whether it's Black Lives Matters or these are, yeah, it shows people are upset, but it's not our movement. It's not guided in the right direction. They're going to do wrong things. Don't join that. That's not your thing. Okay. Learn what is your thing. Well, our thing is this. Stand up, say it. Don't be afraid. They are going to cause issues for you. They will cause issues. Just recently, I don't know if you've seen, they want to create fear. This brother Daniel in Himani in Dallas, okay? This is a family, his brother, I've known the family for many years. His brother is, and you might know him too, you used to be in Dallas. Very revolutionary, good family. The Shayan has been in Qom for a while. They raided their house to get stuff. What has he done? Oh, what is he going to do? Nothing. There's no threat of, if you know what they look like and how they conduct themselves, physically and otherwise, they cannot even hold a gun properly. Okay. I'm not saying this out of disrespect. I'm saying, look, if anyone can frame Shayan for something like that, you have no idea who you're talking about. Okay. There's no threat of that. It's just they're open about their views. They want to make an example out of people who are open about these views. That's what they want to do. They want to create fear. Oh, don't talk about this. Don't invite these people who talk about this stuff. Okay. You're going to have the guts to continue doing the work of the 12th Imam, or you just want to read أَيْنَ قَاطَعُ دَابِرَ الْمُتَكَبِّرِينَ in Arabic and just leave it at that and not talk about who the mutakabbirin are and what cutting off their supply line means. Their supply line is public opinion. The supply line of the Fir'aun is استخف قومه فأطاعوه. The Quran tells us. He tricked his people, they followed him. You need to wake people up from their deep sleep. And once you start touching their supply line, which that's what it is, they're going to start coming for you. Be ready for it. That's why they went for the Ahlul Bayt. The Ahlul Bayt created awareness. The reason why people rose against the Umayyads is because of the awareness the Ahlul Bayt created. Okay. They didn't say pick up arms, do this. No, that wasn't the stage of development. During the time of Imam al-Hussein, yes. Amir al-Mu'mineen, yes. But during that time, Imam al-Sadiq's time, that wasn't it. Okay. But they spoke, that's why they were killed. That's why Mansur was more particular about Imam al-Sadiq than he was against any of his foes. That's why Harun's approach toward the followers of the Imam, keeping in mind Imam al-Kadhim and being careful with him because of the danger that dealing with them had. They imprisoned them, then they poisoned the Imam, they killed him. Why? What did he do? Did he pick up arms? Was there fear of him coming up with, I don't know, a nuclear bomb against them? No. He was touching their supply line, public opinion, people, their thoughts towards them. If people start rising against this, they know what's going to happen. There's no way of standing against it. Our job is to follow that path, speak the truth about the system, about the wrongs that are happening, and the truth about what the solution is. That's another part of it that we have to have the guts to mention. That is our standing against injustice, and it is active, it's not passive. It is now, it's not for the future. It is happening, and then for those places where there are more people that are in line with that, they establish a government like the Islamic Republic, or like Hezbollah, something less than a government, but a government within a government, then they have further responsibilities because the way they're going to be cracked down on is different, and then the way they can respond is going to be different, and they need to do their thing. But here we don't have that. Here what we have is just speak the truth, know what it is, speak it, be brave, and don't worry, Allah has got your back. All right. Sorry for the length. You pressed my button. عليكم السلام ورحمة الله. زيارة قبول. Good question. So the question is about another opinion regarding, because we said that people communicating messages from the Imam is not limited to the minor occultation. The major occultation, we also have that. And we presented the evidence for it. One evidence is hadith from Imam al-Sadiq that says there are people definitely that will know his whereabouts. Not only they will be in touch, not only will they hear, they will know his whereabouts. And the second piece of evidence is negating the misconception about that not being possible, which was that the last writing of the Imam, that was really the last official writing of the Imam to the last deputy, was that whoever فَمَنِ ادَّعَ الْمُشَاهَدَ قَبْلَ خُرُوجِ السُّفْيَانِ وَالصَّيْحَةِ فَهُوَ كَذَّابٌ مُفْتَرٌ. Okay, that was the wording. If I didn't miss any word, I don't think I did, but in case I did. So it says, whoever therefore claims al-mushahada, this is the way that opinion translates it. Whoever claims to have seen, then they are قَبْلَ خُرُوجِ السُّفْيَانِ, before the coming of the Sufyani and before the Sayha, فَهُوَ كَذَّابٌ مُفْتَرٌ, then they are a liar, and that's repeated twice, two different words. Kadhab and muftar mean the same thing. I don't agree with that understanding of this. If this were the understanding, if this was a correct understanding, we would all have to agree, okay, during the time of the major occultation, we cannot have a person communicating a message from the 12th Imam, which then will put into question dua nudba. That's one thing that will be put into question. A number of other things that I'll maybe state a few names and a few accounts, all of that will be put into question. So the first thing is, all that's based on that understanding of the last letter of the Imam, the last writing of the Imam. We explained that that does not seem to be a correct understanding of it. What is being said there, when it's mentioning the signs of the return of the Imam, al-mushahada refers to the zuhur of the Imam. Whoever claims the mushahada, meaning the zuhur of the Imam. So we have hadith, there's going to be people that will claim imamah. Okay, whoever claims that either they're the Imam and they're starting the zuhur, or whoever claims that the Imam is someone else and they're starting the zuhur, they're liars before Khuruj al-Sufyani, and so on and so forth. The dilemma people who say that will face is that the trusted scholars that they have, that they rely on in all of their, in terms of marja'iyya, in terms of pretty much, Ayatollah Bahjat has a recording online. He says, this is on YouTube, he says this person that he knows claimed to have seen the Imam and he heard something from the Imam. Well, now you're going to question Ayatollah Bahjat being a trustworthy source? If you believe that understanding, that interpretation of that narration to be, that strong, you're that strong in that understanding, then I guess you should doubt whether Ayatollah Bahjat is a reliable person. Maybe he's a liar according to that understanding. I know Ayatollah Bahjat, I know he's not a liar, I know he's seen that. I don't think that's his understanding, that whoever claims to see the Imam is a liar. Otherwise he would have never given us that account. He doesn't say, I met the Imam. He says someone that he knows has met the Imam, has said something from the Imam. That part is on YouTube. They asked him the question. Others have this notion that they only mentioned it after their death. Well, how can they mention it after their death? They mentioned it to someone before their death. That person, according to this account, if this is the correct understanding, whoever hears it from anyone else should consider them a liar. So after they die, they shouldn't relay that information. It's a liar who died. You should do la'an on that person. No, that's not the case. That's not the correct understanding of this writing of the Imam. It doesn't say no one can see him, and it does, and that contradicts the hadith from Imam al-Sadiq, because if you take that interpretation of the hadith, it means no one can see him. Well, Imam al-Sadiq has said some people will know his whereabouts. That's beyond seeing him. You know exactly where he lives. So, no, I don't think that there's a foundation for that view, and it's because of that that Ayatollah Bahjat and plenty of ulama, nobody has said when they heard one of the very famous ulama who was known to regularly see the 12th Imam is Bahrul Ulum, Sayyid Bahrul Ulum in Najaf. Everyone, now knows, I don't know during his lifetime how many people knew, but during his lifetime people knew. There's accounts of him conversing with people about that we have received. So he told people during his lifetime, not only that he sees the Imam, he tells this one person that get this shisha stuff out because the Imam doesn't like it. He used to smoke shisha, and he got wind that the Imam is coming to visit him, and he told him to get it out of there because the Imam is coming, he didn't want it around. Okay, so he spoke about his interaction. I haven't seen any of our trustworthy ulama saying Bahrul Ulum, who himself was a great alim, everyone knows that. Nobody has said Bahrul Ulum is a liar. If this understanding of that written account was true, we would have to say Bahrul Ulum is a liar. Forget him, la'an, where's his grave? Let's go do la'an on his grave. No, it's not the case. He's a trustworthy person. That's not what the hadith says. The hadith does not say no one can see him or no one can say that they saw the Imam. That's a misunderstanding. I don't know the exact timeline. I believe it was in the last few centuries. Now, I don't know exactly if it's 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 150 years ago. Roughly around that time, that's what I remember it, very roughly. He continued doing shisha. He just didn't do it when the Imam was around. And he got to see the Imam. And I'm not encouraging anyone to do that. Okay, can we call it done? Okay, then you want to end it?
Thank you, Agha, for flying all the way from California and giving us time on regular basis almost every 3-6 months. You visit us and we benefit from your presence, and also the views you share. It enlightens us and motivates us. We'd like to thank Anur and Istafa Sahab and Jana Shah-E-Najaf for giving us the opportunity to organize this workshop. Thank again Sheikh and all of you for participating. Oh yeah, tomorrow, should we start at 7? 7:30? Okay. So tomorrow we will send the updated flyer. The program will start with Maghriban at 7:30, followed by poetry and a speech. Inshallah. This is the celebration of birth anniversary of Imam. Hazrat Ali Akbar alayhi salam. We have so many imams.